On June 19, 2008, Research and Motions, stock hit $147 per share. The company controlled 50% of the US smartphone market and 20% of the entire global market. Their device was in the pocket of every investment banker on Wall Street, every politician in Washington, and nearly every celebrity in Hollywood. It was so addictive that the term CrackBerry was added to the Webster's New World Dictionary that same year. At that exact moment in the summer of 2008, BlackBerry was not just a tech company. They were an empire. They had higher profit margins than Apple. They had a network that was considered invincible. And they had two CEOs who were hailed as geniuses. 5 years later, the stock was trading at $6. The market share had evaporated to less than 3%. The company had lost 95% of its value, laid off 5,000 people, and was burning through cash so fast that bankruptcy looked inevitable. The company that invented the smartphone that taught the world how to email from the bathroom had been obliterated by the very future they helped create. This is not just a story about a better phone winning. This is a story about a civil war between two CEOs, a disastrous attempt to build a touchscreen that clicked, and a refusal to believe that teenagers would ever dictate the future of business. This is the story of how BlackBerry went from the center of the universe to a paperweight. To understand the collapse, you have to understand the strange, two-headed monster that built the company. Most companies have one CEO. BlackBerry had two, and they could not have been more different. On one side, you had Mike Lazaridis, the founder, the engineer, the quiet genius who dropped out of the University of Waterloo in 1984 to build things. Mike cared about physics, battery life, and bandwidth. He was obsessed with efficiency. He did not want to build toys, he wanted to build tools. On the other side, you had Jim Balsillie, the shark. He was a Harvard MBA with a mortgage to pay who joined the company in 1982. He invested his own money when the company was nearly broke and took over the business side. Jim was the aggression. He was the one flying private jets to close deals with carriers, famously shouting at executives, and forcing telecommunication giants to adopt BlackBerry standards. For a decade, this good cop, bad cop dynamic worked perfectly. Mike built the best technology in the world, and Jim bullied the world into buying it. Their breakthrough was not a phone. It was the interactive Pager 900 launched in 1996. It looked like a bar of soap with a tiny screen, but it could do something no other pager could do: two-way email. At the time, mobile data was a mess. It was slow, expensive, and drained batteries in minutes. Mike Lazaridis solved this with a brilliant piece of engineering. Instead of the device constantly checking for new emails, which kills the battery, he built a system where the server pushed the email to the device only when it arrived. It was efficient, it was instant, and it used a fraction of the data competitors used. But the real turning point, the moment BlackBerry became a legend, happened on September 11, 2001. When the towers fell in New York City, the sheer volume of calls crashed the cellular networks of AT&T and Verizon. People could not call out. The terrifying silence of being disconnected took over the city. But the BlackBerry network was different. Because it used small packets of data instead of voice channels, the messages got through. While phone lines were dead, BlackBerries were buzzing. Emergency responders, politicians, and survivors used them to communicate when nothing else worked. The US government noticed after 9/11, BlackBerry became the standard for national security. It was not just a gadget anymore, it was a lifeline. If you were important, you had a BlackBerry. By 2006, the CrackBerry era was in full swing. The device had evolved. It now had a phone, a color screen, and that iconic physical keyboard with the perfectly sculpted keys. The addiction was physical. Users developed phantom vibration syndrome, where they would feel the phone buzz in their pocket even when it was not there. People typed under dinner tables in movie theaters, even in church. The click 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 of a BlackBerry keyboard became the soundtrack of the corporate world, and the lock-in was powerful. It came from two things. First, the keyboard. BlackBerry users could type without looking. They could bang out a 200-word email in a taxi in 30 seconds. It made them feel productive. Second, BBM. BlackBerry Messenger. Launched in 2005, it was the blue bubble before iMessage existed. It showed you when your message was delivered, the letter D, and when it was read, the letter R. In a world of SMS limits and slow texts, BBM was instant and free. It created an exclusive club. You needed a PIN to add someone. "What is your PIN?" became the ultimate pickup line in bars from London to New York. By 2007, BlackBerry was making billions. Margins were high. Carriers loved them because BlackBerries used very little data, which saved the phone companies money. It was a perfect ecosystem. Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie were the kings of the mobile world. Then, on January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco. When Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, the reaction inside BlackBerry's headquarters in Waterloo was not fear. It was skepticism. Mike Lazaridis watched the keynote and saw a logistical impossibility. The iPhone had a massive glass screen. It had a full web browser. It played music and video. In Mike's mind, the math did not add up. A device like that should drain its battery in 15 minutes. It should crash the AT&T network instantly with its data demands. Legend has it that Lazaridis tore an early iPhone apart and concluded that Apple was lying. He thought the demo was rigged. He told his team, "They have put a Mac in a phone. It will never work in the real world." But more importantly, BlackBerry looked at the iPhone and saw a toy. It had no physical keyboard. How could a lawyer type a contract on a piece of glass? It had no security. It did not have enterprise email servers. It was $500 while BlackBerries were often given away for free with a 2-year contract. Balsillie famously said, "It is okay, we will be fine." They believed the iPhone was for consumers, teenagers, and people who wanted to watch YouTube. BlackBerry was for business. And business, they believed, would never change. For the first 2 years, they seemed right. The original iPhone did not have 3G. It could not send picture messages. It did not even have an app store yet. In 2008, BlackBerry sold more phones than ever before, but they missed the fundamental shift. The bring-your-own-device trend. CEOs and senior partners at law firms bought iPhones for their personal use because they were fun. They loved the web browser, they loved the pinch-to-zoom photos, and soon they stopped wanting to carry 2 phones. They went to their IT departments and said, "Make my work email work on this iPhone." Pressure mounted. IT directors who loved BlackBerry's control were forced to open the gates for Apple. By late 2008, Verizon was panicking. AT&T had the exclusive rights to the iPhone, and Verizon was losing customers by the millions. They needed an iPhone killer. They went to BlackBerry and demanded a touchscreen phone. This was the moment BlackBerry broke its own rules. Mike Lazaridis, who prided himself on perfection, was forced to rush a product to market. The result was the BlackBerry storm. It was a disaster of historic proportions. Mike tried to solve the typing on glass problem by making the entire screen a physical button. The screen literally floated on top of springs. To type, you did not just tap, you had to press down until the whole screen clicked. It was a mechanical nightmare. The sensors failed. The screen would get stuck. The software was so laggy that there was a delay between pressing a button and the letter appearing. When the storm launched in November 2008, it sold well initially because of the hype. But then the returns started. Verizon eventually had to replace nearly 1 million units. They lost roughly $500 million on the project. It destroyed BlackBerry's reputation for quality. For the first time, the CrackBerry was not a reliable tool. It was a broken promise. While BlackBerry was fixing the storm, the world moved to Apple. Apple launched the App Store in 2008. Google launched the Android market. Suddenly, a phone was not just for communication, it was for everything. Games, maps, social media, flashlights, banking. BlackBerry's operating system was built on code from the 1990s. It was designed to save battery and data, not to run Angry Birds or stream Netflix. It was efficient, but it was rigid. Developers hated building apps for BlackBerry because the tools were archaic. This is where the two-headed CEO structure turned fatal. Jim Balsillie saw the writing on the wall. He realized that hardware was a losing battle. He came up with a radical plan: take BBM, their crown jewel, and put it on iPhone and Android. Turn BlackBerry into a services company. Let BBM become the WhatsApp of the world. He negotiated a deal with carriers to make this happen, but Mike Lazaridis said no. Mike was a hardware man. He believed that if they gave away BBM, nobody would buy the phones. He wanted to double down and build a new operating system, BlackBerry 10, to compete with Apple. The company was paralyzed. The two CEOs were pulling in opposite directions. The engineers did not know whether they were building a service or a phone. Decisions that used to take days now took months. In the middle of this chaos in 2011, the unthinkable happened. The network collapsed. For 3 days, millions of BlackBerry users across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa lost service. No email, no BBM. The one thing BlackBerry had over Apple, reliability, was gone. It was a PR nightmare. In a desperate attempt to look modern, BlackBerry decided to launch a tablet to compete with the iPad. They called it the Playbook. Released in 2011, the hardware was actually beautiful. It was faster than the iPad. It had real multitasking. But because of the internal chaos and the rush to launch, they shipped it with a fatal flaw. The BlackBerry Playbook, a device made by the email company, did not have an email client. You could not check your email on it unless you wirelessly bridged it to your BlackBerry phone. If you did not have a BlackBerry phone, the tablet was useless for work. Critics destroyed it. A BlackBerry that cannot do email is like a car without wheels, one reviewer wrote. They eventually added email in a software update months later, but the damage was done. The Playbook cost the company $485 million in unsold inventory. They were literally giving them away to employees to clear warehouse space. By 2012, the numbers were brutal. iPhone and Android now controlled 85% of the market. BlackBerry was bleeding subscribers. The board of directors finally acted. They pressured Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie to step down. Torsten Heinz, another executive, took over. He went all in on Mike's vision, a new operating system called BlackBerry 10. When BB10 finally launched in January 2013, it was actually good. It had a clever gesture interface. It was fast, but it was 3 years too late. The app gap was now a canyon. Instagram was not on BlackBerry. Snapchat was not on BlackBerry. Uber was not on BlackBerry. Without the apps, the phone was a ghost town. Nobody wanted to buy a phone that cut them off from culture. In September 2013, the company announced a loss of nearly $1 billion in a single quarter. They laid off 4,500 employees, 40% of their workforce in one day. The empire had fallen. In November 2013, John Chen was brought in as CEO to salvage what was left. He was a turnaround artist, famous for saving Sybase. Chen looked at the books and made the hard call. He killed the patient to save the organs. He stopped designing phones. He outsourced the hardware manufacturing to companies like TCL. Instead, he pivoted the company entirely to software. He focused on QNX, an operating system BlackBerry had acquired years earlier. You might not know QNX, but you probably use it. It runs the infotainment systems in 175 million cars. It runs in nuclear power plants. It runs in medical robots. BlackBerry survived by becoming invisible. They went back to their roots: security and enterprise. But for the consumer, the end came quietly. On January 4, 2022, John Chen pulled the plug on the legacy servers. Old BlackBerry devices, the Bold, the Curve, the Pearl, stopped working. No more calls, no more texts, no more blinking red light. The story of BlackBerry is one of the most dramatic rises and falls in business history. But looking back, their collapse was not just bad luck. It was the result of 3 specific strategic errors. Lesson 1: success is the enemy of adaptation. BlackBerry was so profitable, and their margins were so high that they were terrified to change anything. They became defensive. They viewed the iPhone as a threat to be dismissed rather than a signal to be studied. When you are the market leader, you have the most to lose by changing, but you also have the most to lose by standing still. Lesson to listen to the presumer, not the CIO. BlackBerry listened exclusively to the chief information officers of big companies. These people wanted security, control, and battery life. They did not care about apps or games. But the users, the actual humans holding the phones, did. BlackBerry ignored the user experience because their customer was the IT department. When the power shifted from the IT department to the employee, BlackBerry had no relationship with the actual user. Lesson 3: your moat can become your anchor. The physical keyboard was BlackBerry's greatest asset. It was their moat. But when the world moved to touchscreens, that keyboard prevented them from adapting. They could not make the screen bigger because the keyboard was in the way. They held on to their differentiating feature so tightly that they drowned with it. BlackBerry proved that in the technology world, you can do everything right for a decade, own 50% of the market, and still be wiped out in 5 years if you refuse to accept that the world has changed. They addicted a generation to a keyboard and then watched as the world decided it would rather touch the glass.